All right, Shalom. I'd like to start off saying, Call Halayim La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Harakakadash Ma'amah. Double honors to the elder apostles, the great millstone, and my elder here one as well. Salutations to the archman of the pushing the truth and sincerity and truth. And peace and blessing to the men, women, and children that believe in the name of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. All right, I'm Khanat Shalom by Yahshua, all from the Lions and the Yahshua camp. And this is another Lions and News and Prophecy. And this is going to be on a couple articles that I have here, right? Excuse me, but so like before I get into the articles, I want to just no, let's get into the articles real quick. So first article says Ukraine gets green light to strike inside Russia from NATO allies. All right, and the next article says, let me go on the notes here. It says Putin warns of West serious consequences if Russian soil is hit. All right. So now we have one that says Ukraine gets a green light to hit Russian soil, and the next article says Vladimir Putin explaining the consequences if Russian soil is hit. So immediately I started to think about scriptures, right? And one scripture I was thinking about was Revelation chapter 13, verse 2. It says, well, start at verse 1. It says, I stood upon the sea, the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, and upon his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads names of blasphemy. All right. So now that's that's going into the European Union, what is it called? The 10 common markets. All right, the 10 common markets. All right, the sea represents the people. All right, and out of that rose, this beast having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 heads are the 7 kingdoms: Germania Major, Germania Minor, Italy, Greece, France, Spain, and Britain. All right. So now, coming out of that, right? So this is basically going into the rebirth of Rome, the European Union, the 10 common markets becoming into the EEC, into the EU, the birth of NATO in America with the rebirth of Rome. All right. So, all right, verse 2, it says, and the beast which I saw was like unto the leopard, right? And his feet were like of a bear, all right? So that leopard represents the beginning of the system dealing with the Greeks and Alexander the Great, or the Crete, all right? And the feet represents the end of a thing, and that's Russia being the bear, all right? And out of his mouth was the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave his power and his seat great authority, right? All right, and that mouth represents Britain. All right, so let's focus on the bear right now. All right, the bear is Greek G714. Arctos is add structurally by ferocity. All right, meaning ferocious or strength, to be equipped, sufficient, or enough. We get to the root word of Creole, all right, to be possessed of unfailing strength, to be strong, to suffice, to be enough, to defend, to ward off, to be satisfied and content. All right, so to be enough. That's what we're going to focus on. That bear being Russia. All right. So now, and then I was thinking, like, because Russia's been in hibernation ever since the Cold War started in the fall of the USSR in 1992. So they've been in hibernation, right? But what happens, the first thing that came to my mind was seeing these articles is what would happen if you woke a bear out of his hibernation early. All right. All right. So I Google searched that. I'm like, what would happen if you woke a bear up out of his hibernation early? All right. It says, what happens if you wake a bear up from hibernation? Experts say it's best not to find out. A bear that senses a threat can wake quickly to defend itself. That's because the bear's body temperature only lowers by a few degrees when they hibernate. Right. So check this out. So now it says a bear that senses a threat can wake quickly to defend itself, and that's exactly what's going on. That's exactly what's happening with what's going on in Ukraine. So the bear was in hibernation, and NATO and America was poking at it. So immediately he went to war, having to defend himself against NATO and the United States because they were trying annexing Ukraine to be a part of NATO, and they already had Russia completely surrounded. All right, by gathering a bunch of other nations that were once formerly part of the Soviet Union or the USSR. You know, so now it could be downright deadly, right? Lethal to wake a bear up out of hibernation, man. All right. So now, according to these articles, we're going to find out what would happen to a bear being waken out of hibernation, right? Well, who's waking the bear out of hibernation? Ultimately, Shahal by Shimei Shai. And this is also going into Ezekiel 38. So we'll probably get that. Excuse me, Slocky. Let me get that on deck. All right. Hold on one second. And so that bear went to sleep as Russia was being invoking and being formed into right back to the Soviet Union or the USSR. And it's being done by Yahweh Shimei Shai. So that's going into Ezekiel 38. I got that on deck. We'll probably go into that after we read a little bit of these articles. All right. It says, Poland has given Ukraine the green light to use weapons supplied by Warsaw to strike targets inside Russia. In an interview with Poland's radio, Kazari Tomczak, the deputy defense minister, said Warsaw does not apply any restrictions when it comes to the use of Polish weapons by Ukrainians. There has been a growing choir of calls for Ukraine to be authorized to use Western weapons to attack targets inside Russia. More than 2 years into the war launched by Moscow in February 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned Ukraine against using long-range missiles provided by NATO members to strike its country. He said on Tuesday that doing so could trigger a global conflict, right? Could trigger a global conflict. So that's exactly what's going to happen. It says Tom Cusack said that Poland doesn't have any objections regarding the use of the equipment it provides to Ukraine. Ukraine can use the weapons as it fits, he said. The Polish position is that there should be no restrictions in this regard. Ukraine should be able to fight with the equipment it receives, because that is why it's received the equipment to be effective. It says a number of other Western officials have also backed Ukraine using NATO supplied weapons to strike military targets on Russian soil. Mm. It says we support Ukraine and we don't want escalation that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed, French President Emmanuel Macron told reporters at a joint press briefing with German uh, Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Germany on Tuesday. We think we should allow them to neutralize weapon sites from which missiles are fired, military sites from which Ukraine is attacked, but we shouldn't allow them to hit other targets in Russian and civilian or other military sites. So there's a conflict right there. France is saying with restrictions. Poland is saying without any restrictions. Anything goes. But we're going to see what Russia says in a minute. Ukrainian soil is being attacked from bases in Russia. So how do we explain to the Ukrainians that we're going to have to protect these towns if we tell them you are not allowed to hit the point from which the missiles are fired? UK Foreign Minister David Cameron has also suggested allowing Ukraine to use British weapons for strikes on Russian soil. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said in an interview with The Economist published on May 25th that members of the military alliance should consider whether they should lift some of the restrictions that they have imposed on weapons donated to Ukraine. The United States has maintained that Washington is against Ukraine conducting strikes on Russian soil using Western weapons, including oil refineries, some of which have been fueling Putin's military throughout the conflict. All right, it says, Charlie Dietz, a Pentagon spokesman, told Newsweek last week that the United States has been very clear that we do not support or enable strikes inside Russia. The security assistance we provide them is for within Ukraine to include the Crimea. It says, and the Ukrainian government understands our position, Dietz said. For one thing, targeting Russian oil refineries can negatively impact global security and stability. But ultimately, Ukraine is responsible for its own operations. So I'll let them speak for themselves. All right. So basically, say whatever if they we're not suggesting that they do so, but if they do, they do. And so that's the outlook that the United States has on it, right? So let's see what Russia has to say about it. It says Putin warns West of serious consequences if Russian soil is hit. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Tuesday of serious consequences if Western countries let Ukraine use their weapons to strike Russian soil. All right, this consistent escalation can lead to serious consequences, Putin told reporters Tuesday in Uzbekistan, according to multiple newswire services. His remarks come amid heightened pressure from NATO members and from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to let the war-torn democracy strike Russian soil directly. The United States has not called for such a move. If these serious consequences occur in Europe, how will the United States behave? Bearing in mind our priority in the field of strategic weapons, Putin added in his remarks to reporters, it's hard to say. Do they want a global conflict? The use of long-range weapons to strike Russia would rely on Western intelligence data, Putin said, and would suggest NATO military personnel would be involved in the attack. Putin issued a stark warning against such a move. All right, so it doesn't matter, like if it could be an accident, but if any one of those long range missiles gets shot off that was supplied by any NATO member country, that's going to be serious consequences, no matter if they were allowed to or not. Because Putin said in the beginning, don't supply them with the shit if you don't want them to use it. He told them that beginning. He told them in the beginning, any offering of aid is going to lead to a conflict. So ultimately, he was correct, because what's the purpose of them having those type of weapon technology if they can't use it? All right. It says the use of long-range weapons to strike Russia would rely on Western intelligence data, Putin said, and would suggest NATO military personnel would be involved in the attacks. Putin issued a stark warning against such a move. Representatives of countries that are NATO members, partially in Europe, should be aware of what they are playing with, Putin said. Ain't no more games. All right? This man is dead serious. It says countries with small territories and dense populations would be particularly careful, Putin warned. Ukraine struggled to fend off Russia's massive offensive in Kharkiv region was highlighted. The ban of firing U.S. weapons to hit inside Russia as a key issue that Kiev has sought to reserve. Some Ukrainian officials have argued that Russia's attack launched from Belgorod region could have been blunted if they were allowed to hit targets in that Russian province. A delegation of 5 Ukrainian members of parliament traveled to Washington this month to meet with Biden administration officials and congressional lawmakers in a bid to push the United States to reverse the ban. All right. It says it looks like if somebody were to attack Washington D.C. from Virginia State, you say Slack it, and you say we're not going to hit Virginia for some reason. David Akamander, headed of Ukraine parliamentary group on U.S. relations, and the lawmaker would lead to the delegation, said earlier this month. It's crazy military people like generals, they don't understand. So they are pushing us as politicians, like, stop. This is insane. They worded this all wrong. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, during a trip to Kiev this month, said that the United States was committed to ensuring Ukraine can win the war against Russia, but stressed Kiev should focus on taking back Ukrainian territory. Ukraine was made to has to make decisions for itself about how it's going to conduct this war. A war is conducting in defense of its freedom, of its sovereignty, of its territorial integrity, Blinken said at a press conference during this trip. We've been clear about our own policy. So basically, they said it again. Ukraine needs to do what they need to do to protect their sovereignty, but we was clear on our stance of it. We're not telling you to do so, but you got to do what you got to do. Basically, that's telling them to do it. But they're throwing the rocks and hiding their hand. They want. Why would you give them weapons if you did not clearly want them to use them? And that's the same thing that Putin was saying earlier when he told them not to even supply weapons. The fact that these nations are merely supplying aid as far as weapons to Ukraine, it makes them in direct conflict with this war. So now, what are you going to have happen? This is Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 1. It says, And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Right. So the Lord has prophesied that even though he's lifting Russia up, all right, he's still against them. It says, and say, thus saith the Lord, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. All right, what is that? Gog and Magog, that's Russia, and Crimea, and those Eurasian countries over there, which was once part of the Soviet Union. All right. Verse 4 says, I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws and bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor. Slacker. Even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. So the Lord is going to bring the Soviet Union, the USSR, back together, fully equipped. Fully equipped. And everybody knows Russia is the top dog on the nuclear arsenal. You know, the top three countries with nuclear arsenals right now is Russia, United States, and China. And two of those are allies. And one of them is a common enemy to the other two. So Russia's giving warning of what's to come, but there's not going to be anything that anybody can do about it, because this is all being set up by Yahweh by Shem Yahweh, man. So the bear is being woken up out of hibernation, right? And it's going to be a lethal threat to the ones that woke it up, which would be United States and NATO. Like it said in Revelation 13, who can make war with, who is like unto the beast, who can make war with the beast? And that's going to be the bear, which is the end of the system. All right, Lord willing, this lesson to edify the servant purpose that like say Ka Halayim La Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Habakah Kodash, my mouth. Double honor to the elder apostle, the great millstone, and my elder Herawan as well. Salutations to the archon that are pushing the truth with sincerity and truth. And peace and blessing to the men, women, and children that believe in the name of Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai. Shalom.